Mm. Hey y'all, welcome to the Devon A. Morris Unfiltered call-in show. Have a seat. Let's get ready. You have any questions? Come on, call in. Come on to that Discord channel. Do me a favor, get the unfiltered crew some finger snaps. We're ready to get started here. Mondays, 8 p.m. Every single Monday, we're here. I'm excited about it. Are you? Let's get this show started, y'all. The greatest scrum show on earth. I'll see y'all soon. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome. You know, this is the start of our show. The Devon A. Morris call-in, the Unfiltered call-in show. That's what we call ourselves these days. So today we have a topic, a simple topic to just have some conversation about. There were some questions that were sent back and forth. There were some people that had some interviews, and I do want to have some conversations around those things. So welcome to everybody who's watching us at this particular time. Again, you know we're going to chop this thing up and send it out. But if you have any questions, whatsoever, then what you should do is at the bottom, you see my name. You also see the actual Discord link. So you're welcome to actually join the Discord link if you have any questions in reference to velocity, forecasting, things of that nature, because that's what we're talking about. I'm not going to dive into a deck or anything like that, but I just want to make sure that you all know to come join us. Here's the deal. Another thing that I want you to be able to do is I want you to go ahead and like and subscribe. Make sure you like and subscribe. Join us, like, follow, subscribe, do all those things because it helps with everything else, okay? And I'll mention that later today as well. Now, the people that are helping us, they're in the back end, and so I want to make sure that I bring them up to show them to you. So, and then you can see the Unfiltered crew like we would normally see them. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Unfiltered crew. You can see some of them waving, and others have got the screen, you know, they're not on the screen. That happens. It happens all the time with us. So it's no big deal, but that's where we're at. That being said, I always say thank you to them because they make sure that the show runs, goes well, make sure that it happens, okay? So that's definitely a good thing. So we'll continue here, and our big deal was to have, and I'll tell you all a story here for just a second, so then we're on the same page. I've had more than one person actually come to me in the past couple weeks about velocity, about the ability to deal with velocity, about forecasting, things of that nature. This week, I'm going to be doing a meetup where we will talk about velocity. We will talk about forecasting more. And the topic is really forecasting, breaking the iron triangle. And that's what we're dealing with this week in that meetup. And so I figured today we would have a conversation about velocity, what it is, and give you some perspectives about estimation, everything else of that nature. So again, if you have any questions in terms of estimates, if you have any questions in terms of velocity, you're welcome to give us a call, and we'll get you on the show. You just got to talk to the moderators, and we'll take it and go from there. Now, that being said, you notice I'm in a different location. I am actually in Pennsylvania. That's where we are. We're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I have my daughter sitting here with me. She should come over and wave. Okay, she don't want to be on camera, but she at least wave, right? And we're doing college visits because it's her spring break. So we're at University of Pennsylvania, Penn. That's where we're at. So we're in Philly. And so we'll be, probably traveling down to Baltimore and then to DC and then back up to Chicago. So we're just kind of doing this tour of schools is what we're doing. So this is the reason why I'm here. And next week, I'll be back in the same location. Now, other things that are happening to make sure that you're aware, For those that don't know, we are doing another a hardship class. I didn't send out about much information about it today, but tomorrow I'll be sending out another email to our group to make sure that they know anybody. If you know anybody that's having hardship, come on and join us for the 250 classes, CSM, CSPO. That's happening April 5th, 6th. That'll be the CSM, and then April 7th and 8th, that'll be the CSPO. Wonderful time if you're trying to be more marketable to get a certification. So these are things that we do to kind of be helpful. And then later on in a month, we'll have another CSM and, a CSM probably a couple months after that. So these are the things that we just kind of do on a regular basis. So that being said, let's start having this conversation about velocity, okay? Last week, we had someone join us on the show. And when they joined us, they wanted to talk about interviewing, right? And in talking about interviewing, that was good, that was great. But this person said, hey, I did well on everything except velocity. Velocity was a topic that kind of stumped me. Velocity was a topic that kind of put me in a position where I had a problem. Now, if you have questions about velocity, go ahead and throw them in the chat. If you have any thoughts about velocity, go ahead and throw them in the chat. So my first statement to make to you is, what is velocity? My daughter just said to me, just asked me the question, is that from physics? Well, the topic is from physics, but obviously velocity is, the change or motion or movement of something, right? The pace of something. And in terms of our world, velocity is the pace at which the development team is delivering story points, something of value, something that we've estimated, right? So when you think about velocity, think about it being what we would call average story points completed. Average story points completed. But then you go back and say, okay, all right, then what is a story point? A story point is just an estimate. That's all it really is. So what happens is something that's really, really simple. You have this thing called a product backlog, or forget the title product backlog. You have this, let's just call it a requirement. And what you do is you estimate that requirement. Now, let's just say you have 5 requirements and you estimate all 5 of those requirements. And let's just say, just make life easy, each one of those requirements get an estimate of 5 points, whatever a point is, right? And so that means you have a total of 25 points that you began this particular sprint with, or this particular time frame with, or whatever it is. You got 25 points total. Now, let's just say you get to the other side and you're supposed to be done. And you complete only 4 of the 5 items. You complete only 4 of the 5 items, okay? And if you complete only 4 of the 5 items, then guess what? You have a situation then where you're actually, your velocity is not the 25 points. Your velocity is actually going to be based on the actual, what you completed. Does that make sense? I'm adjusting this so I can change this, so I can make sure that you can hear me and you can hear me better than what people were hearing me before. I'm gonna adjust the volume here just a little bit, and then we're good to go. So give me a second to do that. So hopefully you all can hear me better on YouTube at this particular point in time. So what I was just talking about was the fact that we had a velocity, that we had a total amount of story points that we began with, okay? And then we got to the end of that time frame, and we've completed a certain amount of story points. So we started off with 25, and then we ended with 20. Your velocity is going to be based on what's been completed. So velocity is based on average story points completed. So, but we don't have much of an average after the first sprint. So obviously, whatever you complete in that first sprint will be divided by 1 to get an average. So this team that I'm talking about, this fictitious team that I'm talking about, would actually have a story point value, a velocity of 20 points. That's it. That's all that they have. It's based on what they've completed. Now, we can debate on what completion means. I'm not here to debate that with you. For me, when you finish it, it's complete. I'm not talking about earning partials in terms of if you're 80% done, maybe you should earn 4 of those 5 points. No, no, no. If you decide to do that, you're welcome to do it. But again, the standard is a standard of completing things. Now, we take that a little bit further and say to ourselves, okay, no problem. We completed that 20 points. That's what our velocity is. We jump into the next sprint. We actually say to ourselves, you know what, last sprint, we didn't do something well, but we've tweaked this thing, and so now we're ready to commit to even more. And so we commit to 40 points next time. Again, that's commitment. And then we get to the end of the sprint, and we only deliver 30 of those 40 points. Okay? What is my velocity at this point? Well, velocity is based on what's been completed. So now you have a situation where you did 20, and now you're doing 30. Well, I take the 20 and the 30 and I add them together and I divide them by 2 to get the average. And in terms of getting the average, now we have a velocity of about 25 points a sprint. So nothing really complicated about that, right? It's just I'm taking story points completed and I'm using that mechanism to drive whatever we're doing moving forward, to make sure that we have some number that we can utilize. So if I know that we can complete 25 points a sprint, and I know that we have 100 points worth of stuff to do in the future, I can tell people it's going to take us about 4 more additional sprints to get things done, because I take that 100 points and divide it by the 25-point velocity, and then that's how I get the 4 sprints left to go. So realistically, I can forecast and have a conversation and let people know exactly what we're doing, exactly what's happening, exactly how we're progressing moving forward. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's all pluses. It's nothing but goodness in terms of it. So when you start thinking velocity, it's not a complicated topic. It really is only complicated when you think about the actual estimate itself, because really it's the results of what you're doing from sprint to sprint to sprint. So now I say to myself, all right, but what about story points? Where does that come from? Well, teams do story points differently. It's just truth, right? And whether they're doing them right or wrong, if they're fairly consistent with it, then they can use it, right? If they're fairly consistent with it. But a story point is a relative measure of size. Size being a combination of complexity, effort, and risk. So again, let's take it back a little bit. Story points is a relative measure of size. Size being a combination of complexity, effort, and risk. Okay? So, that means that when you start thinking velocity, you're not thinking just complexity. You're not thinking just effort. You're not thinking just risk. It's a combination of those things. What is that combination made up of? I don't know. Every requirement, every effort is different. So with it being that combination, is just simply that combination. What percentage it is, that doesn't exist. It's not a third of each one of those things, and then you add them together. So it is complexity, effort, and risk in reference to these items. So when it comes down to velocity, it's not a complicated topic. It's just the thing that people have problems with is coming up with the story point values for each one of the requirements or whatever you're estimating. Okay? Now again, if you estimate all those things, then you're good to go. You have an idea of all the stuff you need to deliver, and you have an idea what your velocity is. You can tell people how much it's going to take you roughly. If you say to yourself, hey, I got a different problem. Okay, no problem. I got to figure out how much we can get done in this time frame. Well, then I'm going to look at time and multiply that times my velocity. Well, okay, I got 7 sprints left. I'll multiply that times my velocity at 25 points a sprint. I know I can get 175 points done. Really that simple, right? If I got 225 points, I know I'm going to have to get rid of 50 of those points. So as you start to just kind of sit back and start to pull this in, there's a lot of stuff to deal with here. But it's not complicated because it's really, really very simple math. Very simple math. So don't really take it on in a way that, you know, it gets you all upset and uptight. That doesn't serve any purpose. So for me, velocity is a very simple thing. Not complicated, completely simple. But it's simple if you use it. If you keep it as something that You don't make complicated. Now, could I say you can use hours and do similar things? You probably could. Yes, you can get a velocity based on hours. We are delivering 500 hours every single sprint. Okay? And then you can average that out and figure out how many hours you're able to do work, and it's not the best use. I don't think so, right? But the idea is, could you theoretically do it and be fairly consistent with it? You're going to run into some problems. So story points are not equal to hours, but you will find that a story point in actuals will be a range of hours. So it's really tough to try to normalize story points because you can't normalize team experience, or team member experience is what I should be saying. So it's one of those things where you get into an interview, okay? Let's just take it back to brass tacks, right? You get into an interview. You can't guarantee that the people that you're working with or that you're interviewing with is doing story points correctly. But you can talk about what is happening in theory, that in theory we are doing this a particular way. In theory, this is how these things are going to happen, okay? Now, if someone comes to you and they ask you questions in terms of an interview about velocity, again, it's average story points completed. That would be a very logical question for someone to ask you. Well, what is velocity, right? If I had a team that delivered, 25 points in one sprint, 30 points in another, 35 in another sprint, what's my velocity? Well, it'd be 25 plus 30 plus 35 divided by 3 because I'm taking the average. So about 30 points a sprint. So the velocity question isn't too tough of a question. Just where people might catch you up at is on the nuances of what people do. Some teams will take a look at the very last sprint. Whatever that very last sprint is, they'll look at that very last sprint, and that very last sprint is what they'll base their velocity off of, which again, for me, that's great data. If I know we've been delivering 20 points, 20 points, 20 points, 20 points, and then all of a sudden we deliver 35, and if we feel like that 35 is a good basis, then with our next sprint, we might commit to 35 points. Can't guarantee we're going to get that 35 points done, but you understand we're probably going to move in that direction of saying, hey, this is what we're going to start with. If we don't get it all done, we don't get it all done. It is what it is. So sometimes you can use that most recent history to give you an idea of what you want that velocity, of what you are going to base some of your future off of, right? But industry standard is a rolling average of the last 8 sprints. Maybe even the last 3 sprints, right? Because in order to have a good idea of where your velocity is going, you need about 3 sprints. But if you want a trend, you want 7, 8 data points to be represented. Now, a trend is a great thing when you look at certain charts, because if you have 7 data points on one side of a particular chart in terms of its medium value or mid value, then you probably got a trend, right? Which means that there could be some special cause variance. But that's a whole nother topic, right? But the idea is that when you have velocity, you're really looking for averages over time. Averages over time. Now, again, you got to ask yourself a question, because this goes back to philosophy. This goes back to how people feel about things. Do you earn partial story points? I don't know. I won't say yes to that. I won't say no to it. It's your choice. Is it something that I do? It is absolutely not something that I do. I don't do it. Because I firmly believe that if I'm going to pay somebody some money for something, I pay them when their job is complete. And the question becomes, do you want to train the people that are doing the work to actually live that way, to actually complete partials or give you partials, and they can earn things based on partials being completed? Well, I don't think that's a good way to do things, but that's just a personal preference. I know of many teams that are in a situation where management is on their back, like literally on their back, like, hey, I'm on your back. And if they don't get the same velocity every single sprint, their management is on their back even more. So as a team, if it's hard for us to complete things, we might commit to 50 points. and then make sure that we maintain that average of 25 points by getting everything 50% done, and then earning 50% of those 20 of that 50 points, thereby giving us that 25, just to make sure that management has something that we're supposed to have put in front of them. But that takes away from one of the core elements of Scrum, right? Because you got to remember, one of the major core elements of Scrum is to deliver working product every single sprint. Every single sprint, deliver working product, right? That means I'm taking something to completion as far as we can complete it as a member of the development team, right? As far as we can take it down to that definition of done, down that engineering life cycle, right? And so I want to get things to a certain level of completion. Now, again, you can have 50 points of 50% done everything, or you can have 50% of things that are completed. For me, if it's my money, I'd rather have 50 points of completed stuff than 50 points of halfway done, halfway complete stuff. Because if the effort stops right then, it stops right now, right at that point, then guess what happens? You can't do anything, right? For that team, they've gotten themselves stuff to a certain environment or to staging or to production, right? Or able to put it in the customer's hands, they're going to be in a better position because there's not much work left to do or no work left to do whatsoever. And I always would like to be in a position where there's no work left to do, because with no work left to do, it means we're in a better position of delivering, lowering risk, getting feedback sooner, okay? That would be one of the major objectives that we would have. So this is a good thing. This is how we build. This is how we continue to move forward. So now you say to yourself, okay, I got this velocity, okay? I'm going to live with the philosophy of we complete things to a completion point. Great. I love it. Now, that means as you continue on 3 sprints into it, hey, you got an idea where you're going. 8 sprints, we're good. We got an idea how we're trending, right? And then if you have a rolling average, that means you're going to continue to drop something off as you complete additional sprints in the future. Other ways to look at velocity, okay? Other ways to look at velocity, okay? Before I look at those other ways, please understand, you don't have to use velocity. There's nothing in Scrum that says you have to use velocity. There's nothing in Scrum that says you have to estimate. You don't have to estimate to complete work. You have to estimate likely because somebody needs you to estimate because they want you to answer some questions from someplace else, okay? That's likely the reason, that's more the reason why we're diving or jumping into that topic, right? So now, great, no problem. So what are some other ways that I've seen velocity, okay? Well, I've seen people, I've done it before, well, where they will use what's called a 90% confidence interval. 90% confidence. Now, when I say 90% confidence, what am I saying to you? Really very simple. I'm trying to have a higher level of confidence that this is right. Well, it's easy to deal with because if I sit up there and I have 8 sprints, right? And I sort them from highest to lowest, right? I can take the highest and drop it and the lowest and drop it and average the 6 in the middle. Because what am I doing in that situation? I'm trying to get rid of outliers. Outliers. You know, I've had 3 sprints in a row of zeros, right? Of zeros, right? 3 sprints in a row of zeros. That the team had no control over. So we just kind of threw those things out. We pretended like they didn't exist. But if the team got a 0 and they earned that 0, I'm probably not going to throw it out. I'm probably not going to throw it out. Okay? But again, that's up to you. That's up to you on how you decide to allow those things to feed into velocity. Okay? So that 90% confidence is one of those things that can be helpful. Because if I had a goose egg, if I had a 0 sprint, I may not want to include that. You know, and then it may not average out very well. It could drag our velocity down. Okay? Or we might, for some strange reason, had a sprint where we completed a lot of stuff. That might be a little bit different. That might skew our velocity in an upward direction. Do I really want to do that? I don't know. I don't think I want to do it. But that's all based on your situation and your set of circumstances. So there are things to think about here as a person, as a team, as a scrum master, as a product owner, as whoever's dealing with this. Because this can impact how you how many story points you think you can get done, how many requirements you think you can get done. Because, for example, if I know that I'm going to the pace of 25 points a sprint and I got 5 sprints left to go, I know I can get about 125 done if that's the pace that we're going at, right? That means if we got 250 points, we're going to have to get rid of half of that. Or we know we're not going to get done half of that, okay? So again, this starts to feed into and help me be able to make decisions, right? Help us to break the iron triangle. Now, other ways you can simply look at velocity that aren't complicated, okay? One of those ways is you can look at the worst case scenario, the best case scenario. You can take whatever number of sprints you have that you want to deal with. I always deal with the last day. You could look at all 50,000 of them if you got 50,000 of them, right? And you can say to yourself, hey, self, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to look at the worst of all of these ones. So the worst of the last 8. And I'm going to make sure that's our velocity because that's our minimum point. That's what we're going to go after. Or I may take one of those sprints that had the best completed story points. And then I may say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take that story point. I'm going to do what? Use that for my future. Use that as our basis, okay? If you are understanding, right, this whole concept of velocity, just let me know because the idea is just throw a thumbs up in the actual chat for me, right? Matter of fact, make sure you like us. Now, if I use that worst case or that best case, then guess what? I'm probably I'm thinking about going at a slower pace, or I'm thinking about going at a faster pace. All those things are relevant and all those things are important to go at that slower or faster pace. If that's a good thing. Well, it really depends. It's all relative. I can't say it's a good thing. I'm interpreting it as a good thing, right? I can't say it's a good thing because, again, I don't know who you're communicating with. I don't know if you're in one of those cultures that is not safe to fail in. If it's not safe to fail in the culture that you are in, then your development team is likely going to go through an overestimation process where they're always saying it's going to take more time, it's going to take more time. And the reason why they're doing that is so it can guarantee you that they get stuff done that you want them to get done. I've been in cultures like that. Maybe you have. Or maybe you are currently in a culture like that. Those are things that you got to deal with, and there's nothing about estimation that's going to help you deal with that is the problem. Because the estimation just gives you some data, and that data doesn't tell you the answer. You still will have to investigate to figure out how to solve the problem or how to communicate in a way that's going to be appropriate for you to be able to do so. Nothing super complicated. It's all really simple. So it goes back to that basis. You remember that basis of how we were doing things, right? It goes back to that same old basis. And if we use that same old basis to keep us moving forward, now you have a basis on the conversation in terms of an interview. Because it is likely, if they're asking you about velocity, they're asking you about story points completed, averaged over sprints. If they're going to ask you to forecast, are they going to ask you something super complicated? Maybe, maybe not. But it's likely they're going to ask you to say, hey, how much scope do you think I can get done? Or how many sprints is it going to take to get it done? Or what pace or what velocity does the team need to go at? If I know that I got, 2 sprints to get work done and I got 100 points, I got to do 50 points per sprint. I would have to do 50 points per sprint. I can't get around doing 50 points per sprint. If my team is not doing 50 points per sprint, then I got a problem. I'm going to have to communicate. I'm going to have to let people know what's going on. And we're going to have to find some way to actually deal with that. Some way to deal with that in a way that is going to work for us. So now you start taking a step back and saying to yourself, hey, this velocity can help me with some stuff. This velocity can help me do some things. This velocity can, at a minimum, help me manage stakeholder expectation. Now, when I am using velocity, when I'm using story points, my entire purpose is all about managing stakeholder expectations. I can't offer any guarantees. I can't. But I can say this is the more likely situation, and it would be nice to have statistics to help back up your more than likely situation. So, that being said, this is a good thing. This isn't a bad thing. This is a good data points for you to be able to move forward with. So understanding velocity is absolutely critical and key. And the majority of teams that I ever work with, a lot of them want to use velocity. Now, I'm gonna step back for a moment, and now you see me sit back, right? But I'm gonna step back for a moment and talk about something really simple. These things can be gamed. They can be. Any metric that you put out there can be gamed to some degree, can be utilized to and used against people. Some of you all have seen those teams that management knows you can go a certain velocity, let's say 20 points, 25 points, whatever that velocity number is. They know or feel you can go that, right? And if they know you can go that, then they may start torturing the team and be like, hey team, we want you to be able to do a certain thing. We want you to be able to do 25 points every single sprint. If you don't do it, then guess what we're gonna do? Torture you. Some of you have that situation. And if you do, it is what it is. There's nothing that Scrum can do to change that for you. Scrum can't make your management do anything because there's no such thing as Scrum police in Scrum. And I want you to recognize that. Some people think that actually having story points is going to help them do something, and it ain't going to help change the mind of your actual management unless they want to acquiesce to it being a good forecasting mechanism. And then here's the other thing. I don't believe in estimation because I think most estimation is just done for the sake of the management trying to make sure that you can get things done. Because a lot of times once they give you a date, you're kind of stuck. It doesn't matter what your estimates are. They give you a date. They say to you, hey, you know what? I need all this work done by this date. Now you got a different problem. You got to find a way to increase your velocity. And if you have to increase your velocity, you can do that a couple ways. Maybe adding another team is another good way to increase your velocity, other than adding skill sets to this team, right? Or you might decide to work a bunch of overtime. And that's the likely scenario. When I see teams that are on this death march and they got to get a lot of stuff done, then guess what happens? They start working overtime. They start working overtime to get more story points done. And again, Scrum ain't going to do nothing for you on that. Safe is not going to do anything for you on that. Extreme programming is not going to. There's no philosophy, methodology, framework, right? Set of values and principles is going to do that for you because they can't battle humans. I mean, these mechanisms, these methods cannot battle humans. So sometimes you're stuck in that situation and you're just really stuck in it. You're stuck in it and you just keep on moving, okay? So this velocity thing, it's not a complicated thing. Just know that that's just a number. It's a number that's void of interpretation. It doesn't tell you anything but what the number is. And the number is the truth for whatever it's the truth for. So now, if you interpret it in a good way or a bad way, it's going to impact your behaviors. Positively or negatively. Don't know. But it's something that you got to be willing to go through. It's something that you got to be willing to deal with. It's something that you got to really be willing to carry yourself through. Because these things, those problems, didn't happen overnight. Those problems probably existed before you ever started Scrum or Safe or whatever it is you're doing. Probably existed already. Okay? So all Scrum is going to point you back toward is solving the problem. Solving the problem. So why don't you just solve the problem sooner versus later so then we don't even have to have a conversation about solving a problem. Now another thing I would say to you is that when I think about things like velocity, I think about it as a vanity metric. What do I mean by that? Just metrics that don't have a lot of weight except for in this current process, and that's it. I sound like I'm wrong for saying that, right? But most teams, most developers, most people that are working, testers, whatever you want to call the roles, right? They really don't. They don't have no reason to care because they're not human. So here's the deal. In all seriousness, when it comes down to velocity, velocity isn't a complicated topic. It is a really simple topic that you can utilize in many ways. You can action in many ways that would actually help you to take objective things and find a way to estimate them and complete things, so then you can get closer to doing whatever it is you're wanting to do, and that is get back to doing the job you're there to do. So, that being said, that is my spiel on velocity. But I do believe it's a vanity metric. I think that what you really want to drive out of that is the real purpose you're trying to get at. So, a lot of times when you're doing velocity, the main thing that they want you to do is be able to communicate with them whether the data is impacted. Whether the data is going to be impacted, that's a time thing. And the smallest unit of time that we have in Scrum is called a sprint. Great. So how many sprints will it take to get the work done if it's off the path of what we've already agreed with? This is a question that people may ask of you. Now, you take that vanity metric and you actually use it to help you answer the question at hand. I know it's going to take me 4 sprints to get it done. I know it's going to take me 5 sprints to get it done. How could you really ask for more? How could you really ask for more? You don't have to ask for more. You don't have to be forced to do any more. So now you have to say to yourself, okay, self, I'm in an interview. If you know the basics of what it takes to do velocity, then you're good to go. You have no worries. You have no problem. You have no issue. Am I thinking right here? Am I thinking wrong here, people? I don't know. I just bring it up just to make sure that you are fundamentally aware. Okay? So, that being said, this is one of those days where I wanted to make sure we talked about velocity, and I wanted to see if people had questions in reference to velocity. And we don't have anyone that has questions in reference to velocity that at least have come into our Discord channel to be able to ask those questions. So, just to make sure I'm good here, I am double checking with my team to make sure, and it looks like, based on what I can tell, my vision is accurate. So, that being said, this will definitely be one of those things where I chop the video up and give you this in pieces. But I want you to make sure that you understand that velocity is what it is. It's an amazing thing. If you know how to take advantage of it, it's an amazing tool to have with you because it can help you actually forecast. And forecasting is the name of the game until you get something completed. So it's an amazing thing to know how to do, but it does take practice. It does take work. And you can create things like a burn up, burn down chart, when you have a velocity, especially from a release perspective, because it's going to show you how you're trending over time or how you're progressing to get toward that goal. So all these things are just major pluses. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it at that for this evening. And I'm going to say to you, for everyone that showed up, we appreciate you showing up. I know this is a different venue. Next week, we're going to send out what our topic is going to be of this conversation. And we're just going to let people call in as blanket as they can, and then we'll take it from there. But on that note, I am going to say we're going to have a shorter show today. We don't have anyone that's asking questions, so we will bring back and come back next week to allow people to ask questions on whatever the next topic is, or if you have any general questions, you come back for that. Other than that, I'm going to say, look, y'all have a wonderful evening. We will continue the series next week, and we'll talk about whatever topic is going to be, but I'll let you know. Other than that, this is Devon Morris. I'm saying peace. I'll see you next go round. Thank you, everyone. This was fun. But velocity is not a complicated topic, people. I'm going to be doing an actual thing about forecasting next week. So maybe next week our topic will be forecasting. So how about we just make that, just draw that line in the sand. We talked about velocity. We'll talk about forecasting next week, okay? And then if you have any questions on actually making this transition of taking velocity and utilizing that to be able to ask questions. Next week will be the show to actually come in and ask questions about, and I'll bring the actual. I'll present to you all what I present in the actual meetup. How about that, to make sure you have an idea what some of this stuff is. So this is a good thing. Just, again, velocity is one of those scary topics, man. But it's not really that scary because it's just putting numbers to the table. And I just always think of velocity as being something I can use. Something I can use that I don't have to add any emotion to. You know, I can just give people the brass tacks number, and the number is what it is. And so next week we will definitely jump and talk about forecasting. Forecasting will be our big thing next week. And it's interesting because I've been able to use Scrum, or I've been able to use story points, velocity, things of that nature to calculate things like earned value. Like literally to calculate earned value. And the thing about it is that it was stupid, man. It was real dumb. It was as stupid as it can be. But for some people, you have to do that. Okay? For some people, you have to do that. So on that note, I'm going to leave it at that. And we'll chop this up and get videos out this week. But other than that, I will see you next go round. So look, everybody, enjoy the rest of your start of your week to your week. If you have questions about forecasting, be prepared for that next week, because I'll go deep as you want to go on forecasting, and then we'll go from there. So next Monday will be about forecasting. That'll be the start of April. And then the week after that is going to be Success Mondays. Every second Monday we do Success Mondays. So that's what I'm going to ask for the people that are doing Scrum. People that are new to Scrum would love to hear your success story related to Scrum. So on that note, we will leave it at that. You got an idea what's coming. I will see you all, in a week. Same time, same place. 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Again, this is Devon Morris, Unfiltered. I'll see you next week. Enjoy. 8 p.m. people on Mondays. Have a good one.